if you have joy or not. And I could ask you, why don't you have joy? And I guarantee you, you'll blame somebody. You don't understand what I went through, what they did to me, what they said. You don't understand my situation. You don't understand the joy of the Lord. Because you can enter into the joy of the Lord in the middle of the darkest night, and it can burn like a fire, and nobody can put it out, nobody can quench it, no one can stop it. And I've preached like this before, and folks walked out the back door, and you ask them, what did he preach on? They can't even remember, because they like their pain. They're almost sadists, nihilists. They love to hurt themselves. They love to cut themselves because somebody else cut them for years. And it's the only way they know how to live is to abuse themselves, is to annihilate themselves. And Jesus said, I don't want you to die. I don't want you to hurt. I don't want you to cut yourself. That's what leads us to leave us alone. I want to cut myself. I want to be chained and break them and bleed, and I feel good in the dark because it's all I'm used to. Jesus said, I'm not leaving you in the tombs, Legion. I'm not leaving you in this mess. I'm not letting you cut yourself anymore. I'm not letting you dwell among the dead anymore. I'm not letting you do this. And he says, go, and he's freed, and he's sitting clothed in his right mind, and he jumps up and down, and he says, Jesus, let me go with you. And Jesus said, no, you go home. Why? I want you to take what you just received, go back to your house, knock on the door, and when your wife comes to the door, you're going to look like the same shaggy, beard, matted, hadn't taken a bath in a long time. She's going to see you, but you're not going to look the same anymore. You're going to be free. You're going to have joy. And I want you to go into that city, and I want you to show the world what God can do in a moment time. I want you to take the joy of the Lord. Same thing with the woman at the well. Nobody, Jesus didn't say to her, go into the city and tell everybody. He couldn't stop her. They were mid-sentence. They were in the middle of a dialogue. There was no, Jesus said, you must go and witness to Samaria. She dropped her water pail. She didn't say, Jesus, can I go? Jesus, should I go? How should I? She didn't even ask it. And the way I see that picture is Jesus is standing there smiling as she takes off running. She runs through the city. Come see a man. It wasn't something she was taught. It wasn't something that she was programmed. It was living water, and living water made her, forced her, joy made her preach the gospel. She didn't even know what preaching was. She knew that she went to the well, and when she left the well, she didn't care anything about what anybody said. She didn't care about water buckets. She didn't care. I appreciate it if I can get your attention. She didn't care about any of that. All she cared about was the joy of the Lord, and she had to tell it. Have you still got that? Do you still have that in you? I've just got to tell somebody. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. I'm not even asking you to do it. I'm not asking you to show me a visible sign. I'm asking you to ask yourself, do I still have it in me that I can't keep it to myself? I've got to tell somebody about Jesus Christ. The joy of the Lord is our strength. 1 Peter chapter 1. Verse 6, wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations. You got a lot of stuff going on. This season of your life, he says, wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations. That the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. Who having not seen, ye love, in whom though now ye see him not, yet believing, you don't see him but you believe, ye rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. Verse 6, he says, you're going through hell. This season of your life, You live on East Hale Street. Everything that can go wrong is going wrong. He says it is a trying of your faith. You ever had your faith tried? It's a trying of your faith. It's a dark season. He says, but that trying of your faith is more precious than even gold that perishes. He says, I want you to change your perspective because you thought that this trial was going to kill you. He says, no, this trial is going to equip you. This trial is going to teach you the glory of the Lord. It's going to teach you patience. And though you're tried with fire, he said, that you might be found under praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. That's where the focus is. I'm thinking about Him. I'm living in the light of His return. I mean, seriously, I want you to think about all the issues you're going through right now. Just see if you can stack them up real quick. Now, let's just say that you knew for an absolute fact that Jesus Christ is coming back to get you tonight at midnight. How many of those things would you continue worrying about? Would you care about your electric bill? Huh? Y'all want to talk to me? I'm talking to you. You're supposed to talk to me. I mean, would you seriously, would you really care about the doctor's statement anymore? Why? It doesn't matter. That's exactly what Peter's trying to tell us. We only have this moment. And Jesus could come back the next moment. He says, will you please live in the light of the appearing of the Lord Jesus Christ? And this is what Peter says to us in verse 8. You haven't seen Him, but you love Him. You haven't seen Him, but you believe in Him. You rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory. Now, this he says that we should be doing, rejoicing with joy unspeakable, full of glory, in the middle of temptation, in the middle of a fiery trial. So you don't have an excuse. I don't have an excuse. When I don't have the joy of the Lord, I don't have an excuse. I could blame 1,000 things. I could point you to 1,000 things. But at the end of the day, nobody is responsible for you losing your joy. You are responsible. Amen. Somebody say, help me, Lord. I want to take it just a little bit further. Look at Acts chapter 5, verse 41. It says that they departed from the presence. I got it up here on the screen, Mother Ferris, if you want. I don't know, can you see it? Acts chapter 5, verse 41. And they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for His name. That is so radical that I might just skip over it. That's too much. This text didn't say they rejoiced in spite of. This verse says they had joy because of. That's heavy. This text says, it does not say that Peter and the apostles rejoiced in spite of their trials. This text says they beat their backs for preaching the gospel. They threw them in prison, said, don't you ever preach the name of Jesus again. They let them out. They beat their backs, shredded their skin off of their backs. And because they beat them, and because they shredded the skin off their backs, that's the reason they rejoiced. They said, I can't believe that we were allowed to suffer in His name. That's Christianity. But we're too fat, we're too lazy, we're too slow, too sluggish, we're just, and I'm talking about spiritually speaking, just too slothful. We're just too consumed with our families, our work, and our business, and our little things, and we try to just survive. The early church didn't survive, they thrived. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to build a big church with this kind of preaching. So I just threw that out the window some time ago. I'm going to teach this church what real Christianity is. Because and I told my wife before service tonight, if you took away church and our external look, most folk would have no means of exercising their faith, and they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. They would sit at their houses and they would never do anything for God because church has become their God. Now, I believe in going to church, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, it troubles my mind a little bit that The numbers over the last couple of months have replenished on Wednesdays, and we need to be praying about that, seeking the face of God. And I'm going to try to see what we can do about that. But at the same time, it's almost as if the only time we're really Christians is when we're at church. They didn't operate that way in the book of Acts. They had power in the morning, they had power in the afternoon, they had power in the evening, they loved in the morning, they were on fire. Yeah, I told you about the time that I was praying, and God told me, I was praying about revival, and the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me and said, I want you to go to the book of Acts, and I want you to record every single instance of the word revival is used in the book of Acts. So I pulled out my Strong's Concordance on my computer, which has a search engine that will scan the whole entire book. It doesn't miss anything. And I pulled up the book of Acts, and I scanned every derivative of that word that I could think of. Revival, revivals, revivalists, reviving. There was nothing. The word is not in that. It's not there. So then I went back to God in prayer, and I said, God, the word revival is not in the book of Acts. And He spoke to me and said, because they didn't need revival. What you call revival, they call Christianity. The power of God is such it's almost become fictional to us. Libraries grind out books talking about revivals of the past. Libraries grind out book after book, printing press, book after book. So we go on Google and we search about all of the Welsh revival in Azusa Street, and it satisfies us for a moment and it kindles a little fire. But what we don't understand is all the reading in the world is not going to bring revival, tabernacle revival. I have no problem with us kindling up the fire. We should. And sometimes a good book from David Brainerd, will reading his journal. Robert Murray McSheen, some of these incredible men of God. You know, it was John Hyde. I think he died when he was 28 years old. They did the autopsy. His heart had shifted from the left side of his body to the right. And they said, why? And they said, because evidently this man was in such an agony and stress for so many hours of his life that his internal organs shifted. You know what praying Hyde did? Sometimes for days, without break. They call him praying Hyde. There's no wonder that he was on another continent and prayed down one of the most incredible revivals ever known in India from another continent. Because he understood that it didn't matter where he was at, God is everywhere. After David Brainerd died, I know these are names that you're not familiar with. He died around the ripe old age of 29 also, and I didn't have this in my notes. Are you all okay? Can I go just a little bit longer? I don't want to wear you out tonight. I had every intention, and I may still quit at 9. I want to let you working folk get home. David Brainerd died, and sometime after his death, there was some college students that went to his house, and they wanted to see his study, his library, and they knocked on the door, and the doorkeeper came, and they said, we want to see Brainerd's library. He said, okay. They walked in. They said, man, it was a massive library. The man had read thousands of books. And they said, we just wanted to see where David Brainerd got his power from. And the old keeper said, he kind of chuckled and he said, that's not where he got his power from. These books is not. And the student said, I don't understand. And he said, I want you to go over and sit at his desk. Pull his chair out and sit. He said, now pull up to the desk. He said, you see that little groove right there on the right? He said, yeah. He said, I want you to lay your right elbow in it. He said, you see that groove there on the left? He said, yes, I want you to lay your left elbow in it. He said, now I want you to put your face in your hands. And I want you to weep all night long. He said, that's where he got his power. I find myself talking more about it than I do pursuing it. Because it's easier to talk about it. You see, and we've been so pre-programmed, and you'll recognize this immediately. Not all of you, some of us come from different backgrounds, but a lot of us have been so pre-programmed that the very idea of praying all night long makes you depressed. It's a hardship. That lets me know that we don't understand prayer, because prayer is not just saying things. It is a connection to the throbbing heart of the universe. It is us entering into His presence. And what is in His presence? Joy. I want you to go back and read the book of Acts again. And I want you to see what brought them joy. One thing. Serving Jesus Christ. They had joy in the prison. They had joy when they were being beaten. They had joy if they were dying. They had joy, joy, joy. In fact, they were so filled with God, so filled with the Spirit, so filled with joy, that when they went to stone Stephen, the writer said his face looked like the face of an angel. Stones crushing his face, but he had the face of an angel, an angelic glow about him. So I repeat my point. If you'll look here, they didn't just rejoice in spite of the tribulation. They rejoiced because of it. They said, we can't believe that I get to participate in the nail-scarred hands and the suffering. Here's one of my favorite verses in all the Bible. Psalm chapter 30, verse 5. You got it up? For His anger endureth for a moment. In His favor is life. Listen carefully. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. If you're here right now, you're feeling dragged down. Melancholy, gloom, doom, etc., etc. There ought to be enough intellectual capacity about you, just mentally speaking. If you have any faith that God is real at all, you should be able to reach into your knowledge of God and who He is and what He's done for you in the past and say, okay, I may not feel like dancing right now, but weeping is going to go home. And joy is coming around the bend. If you can't get a hold of anything else other than faith, let faith rise up and say, this too shall pass. It ought to make you stand up again. It ought to make you say, I want to go forward again. Look at John chapter 20, verse 20. And when He had so said, He showed unto them His hands and His side. Then were the disciples glad when they saw the Lord. They just saw it. The word glad there is a derivative of joy. They saw Him and they rejoiced. Now you've got to have the context right, because they just crucified the Lord of glory. They've given up everything, brother. They've turned their back on their religion. When was the last time you turned your back on religion, on Christianity? You don't do that. I wasn't a Hindu. I wasn't a Buddhist. My mother raised me in Christianity. These folk had just lost everything to be Christians. They turned their back on their customs, on their traditions, on thousands of years of I mean, it was amazing. And now He's dead. But now He's alive. They didn't care about anything anymore because they could see Him. Romans chapter 5, verse 10. For if when we were enemies we were reconciled to God by the death of His Son, much more being reconciled we shall be saved by His life. Listen to verse 11. And not only so, but we also joy in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom we have now received the atonement. Now, I didn't put Romans 5, 10, 11 up there, but you take Romans 5, 10, 11, go home tonight, and I want you to read it. And that verse, there's no way around it. That verse is telling us that if you have been atoned, your sins have been forgiven, and you're washed in the blood, you should have joy. And if you look in the mirror and you don't have joy, it is time for you to go to war. It's time for us to stop talking about junk. You say that you're an evangelist. You say you want to win souls. It's time to stop talking about it. And it's time to do it. You say you want revival. We say that we want to move with God. It's time to stop talking about it. And it's time to do it. If you look in the mirror and you don't have joy, you need to know the reason is you've had a disconnect somewhere between you and God. So stop looking at the man. Stop looking at the family. Stop looking at the money. Stop looking at the bank account. And I want you to start looking up. I will lift my eyes to the hills from which cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord. My help doesn't come from you. My help doesn't come from the church. I get help in church, but it's only because God came and God helped me at the church. I've also had God help me prostrate the floor in my living room, at my house, in the kitchen, or walking down the sidewalk, or driving down the interstate when I was so hurt and so broken that I didn't know which way to go. And I lifted my eyes into the hills and help came down. We're always looking for help coming from this side, that side, over there. If this would work out, nothing's going to work out. Forget about it. Everything will hold down if you'll get your eyes on God. God has got you covered. And I don't want you to go another minute without Jesus in it. I don't want you to go another second without joy. I don't want you to go another second without peace. I don't want you to go another second without a skip in your step. You ought to be happy. You ought to be joyous. You ought to be gloriously filled with His pleasure and His mercy and the glory of God. It ought to be you so powerful that you don't have to say you don't have to tattoo Jesus on your body. You ought to have the glory of God in your life so much that they know what you are and you walk into the room with them. Give me a grill with Jesus in it. While I'm cussing, I smile. Y'all ain't Christian. It means absolutely nothing. But the presence of God, the joy of the Lord means everything. How many times have we been down, discouraged, preachers? Brother Britt, we've been working. Brother Greg, we have ground and wept and bled together. How many times have we come in each other's presence, one of us down, and we walked away from each other's ministry, and we're never the same again? It's just like a flame. Not only am I responsible for the joy of the Lord in my life, but what happens if I catch on fire? What happens to all of those that are dying and dry around me? It begins to spread. Woo. I got quite a bit to say. I think I can get it done quickly. If you'll please stay with me. I'm begging you. I don't want to have to rehash this again. Not only should we draw joy from the Lord. Now, I know this is going to sound a little bit contradictory, and I think that you'll understand the context of my sermon. You think that joy comes from someone approving of us. That's not what I'm saying when I say joy comes from others. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, Brother Josh, is when you are, just be quite frank with you, 2 Sundays in a row you sat in the front row. I could not express to you what that's done to me. I have drawn joy from you to see the different miracles that take place, to see the zeal in you. It makes me want to become a better pastor. We should have joy in each other, and I'm going to drop a couple big bombs on you. I want you to watch this right here, 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 19 and 20. And I want to talk particularly to the ministers in the house. And the point that I want to make is that we should find joy in the congregation. And if I can bring that on down just a little bit more plain, it ought to make you very, very excited and happy to have the opportunity to be a leader in this church, a minister in this church. You ought to come into this church knowing that people are looking at you. And however you respond, you set the temperature, you set the tone. You need to know that folks are going to enjoy this service. Most of my ministers are on this side. People are going to enjoy or not enjoy our services by the way we act. I can tell it when I preach. If I'm having a heavy time and I preach, just like this past Sunday, I felt great in my spirit, but I was so tired. It was a long week. I preached bunches of times and very little sleep, just a couple hours a night. I came in Sunday and I was so tired and I was so weary, and it affected the house. I was preaching on the triumphal entry. We should have been doing head spins and break dancing and the centipede down the aisle. But it didn't even move us. It wasn't all my fault. Some of it's because you don't have children. We ought to be able to dance just thinking about Jesus. We ought to be able to stand and lift our hands just because somebody said Jesus. Did he just say the name of my God? Did he just say the name of my Savior? Yes, he did. I should draw joy from you. I should have joy just coming in, and whether you say amen or not, whether you shout or not, just being able to minister to you. Just to be able to come in and love you and to sit with you and to shake your hand, hug your neck, to give Mama Ferris a big fat kiss on the cheek every single service and say, how you doing, beautiful? And dare anybody to say anything. To give Mama Covington a big old kiss on the cheek or the forehead and say, wow, you look beautiful tonight. I ought to draw joy from that. 1 Thessalonians 2:19. For what is our hope or joy or crown of rejoicing? Are not even ye in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ that is coming? And Paul says this to the church of Thessalonica, the people. He said, for ye are our glory and joy. Now Paul says, I have hungered, I have thirsted, I've not had food, I've not had money, I've been broke, I've been sick, I've been floating in the sea, I've been whipped, I've been imprisoned, I've been lied on, I've been cheated, I've been talked about, mistreated. I mean, it's been bad, but then he says, I get joy in the saints down there in Thessalonica. I'm going to make a statement, and it's going to be a little bit cutting for some of you, and I'm not even sure if you'll believe me. But can you put your phone up, please? Thank you. I want to make a statement, and it's going to be a little bit difficult for some of you to swallow. There ought to be a joy that springs up in your heart just coming into this place and sitting down with each other. We are so selfish and self-centered that when we don't enjoy the church, what do? We blame the church. That's our nature. Because God knows there can't be anything wrong with me. It has to be everybody else. I'm telling you, no. I'm telling you that I have seen people walk out of the church, 8 people saved, 3 baptized in the Holy Ghost. Somebody said, it's the greatest service I've ever been in. I watched another lady take all the tapes that she had bought and throw them back in the box. Say, I ain't coming back. How can that be? How can a person sitting here think that Revival Tabernacle is the greatest church in the world, and a person sitting over here say, man, this is just so ho-hum? It's not the church. It's you. It's you. You need the joy of the Lord, and you need to fall in love with your assignment again. You need to fall in love with where God has placed you. It's up to you. It's your responsibility. It's not my fault that you don't love where you're at. And if God hasn't sent you here, then you need to go where God has sent you. But I'm going to tell you, and I don't want you to get mad at me. I've seen it over and over and over. It's like that family. I was pastoring down in Dover. They had come to our church a few years earlier, then left. And now they call me and say, Pastor Lamb, we want to talk to you. I said, all right. I knew what they wanted. They sit down in my office and they said, we want to come back. I said, okay. Now, they had been to literally 7 churches in 5 years. 7 churches in 5 years. They sat down and she began to talk. And she said this, almost verbatim. She said, I promise you, Pastor, I know we've left a lot of churches. Verbatim is what she said. But it was never our fault. It was those churches. Now, I'm not the sharpest knife in the cupboard, but I'm not a butter knife. She had forgotten that she had been to my church and had left it 3 years earlier. So I said, well, why did you leave our church then? Then she had to, well, the Lord led me. I don't think they got a home church right now. They've tried 3 or 4 more. You think the problem was all those churches? The problem was them. You will enjoy this church as much as you are committed to this church. You will enjoy the ministry, my preaching, as much as you commit yourself to enjoy it. It always amazed me how I could preach a message. And this is going to sound weird, and I don't even know how to say it, except I just say it. And I watch folk, some folk, they can't say amen, they've got no excitement about it. I preach, and I'm like, man, I don't even think they're here. Walk out, Then they go anywhere else and hear anybody else preaching. It's the greatest preaching ever. And that used to really bother me, and I used to take it really personal. But then I realized it's not. It's that they have become ho-hum with where they're at, what they're doing. And when they go somewhere else, it's new. And people like new things. And they find a little excitement with new things. It's a little weird to me. But it is very similar if the same person cooks every meal for you for 50 years and you go to somebody else's house and they fix hot dogs. You're like, man, that's some of the best food I ever ate in my life. And your wife is like, I fixed you beef stroganoff with a side of a zucchini and linguine on the side last night. I fixed you a French bun. And you're going crazy over hot dogs. Yeah, but they use a purple pot to cook it in. And they sprinkle some paprika. And you know what, mothers? It's silly for you to get offended at that. But it's also silly for us to fall into that kind of mentality because something new. And you know what folks do? They'll leave this church and go to another one because that church over there don't know who they are. I pastor lots of people now, brothers and sisters, and I've told them, they come in and say, "Brother Lamb, what do? I think I want to move to Kentucky. I think I want to move to Florida. I want to move to Georgia." And I said, "It's not going to help you any." They said, "Why?" I said, "Because you can't run from the problem." I said, "Why can't I?" I said, "Because you are the problem. You're the problem." I've had folks sit in my office right here at this church and say, "Tell me what to do." And this is what I said to them. You need to change. You need to repent. You need to get these things fixed in your heart. And instead of doing that, you know what they did? They left the church. They backed away. Because we would rather back away and go somewhere else and start something else as opposed to becoming the fire and the passionate, joyous Christian that we're supposed to be where we're at. Amen. And I'm going to show you one more here, and I'm about done. I'll just skip right through this. I think the congregation should make it joyful for the leaders to lead them. It's not fair for you, for me to have to try to draw joy from you and you not make it easy on them. Hebrews 13:17, obey them and have the rule over you and submit yourselves. For they watch for your souls as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy, not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. I'm just going to be honest with you. When you don't help me preach, it doesn't help me preach with joy. When these other ministers preach, and I'll tell you something. I'll say something to my preaching brethren. And this is something that I had to work on. But there's an older gentleman down in the Panhandle. He's a great man. He's a great man. But when you preach, dude, he ain't going to look up. He's not going to shake his head. And that would be perfectly fine if he would leave everybody alone when he's preaching. I mean, it's not perfectly fine, but when he's preaching, come on now, you're not helping me. Come on, somebody help me. Come on, somebody shout glory. And everybody's just like, and I watched the preachers as they began to withdraw from his ministry. Why? Because you reap what you sow. There has to be a reciprocation. Is that the right word? Reciprocate? A giving and a getting and a giving and a getting, and I give and you give. And you need to know that it spent me, it took me 2 hours just to put this together. Much less my sermon. And you know why I did this? It wasn't so I could look like, for heaven's sake, I've got 2 50-inch screens. I'm not trying to be, T.D. Jakes. I do it because Mama Ferris told me I like that. She said, it makes it just chisel into my mind. It just sticks a lot better. I do it because I feel like that if I can let you read along with me, it'll stick a little better. I don't do it because I love you. Now, do you think that do you honestly think that I went to the internet and Google searched a sermon on joy and copied and pasted a sermon and brought it in here and I'm spitting out regurgitated something from somebody from somewhere? How many has faith that I studied this sermon out from scratch? Guess what? I did. From scratch, I thought about it probably 20 hours. I spent 4 or 5 hours studying it. Now, you other preachers, how much time do you put into your ministry? You want to know why? I remember there was a preacher for us down in Dover, and I do like I always do. I'm on my feet. It's just like when I'm preaching. I know, guys, that it ain't always the most powerful, super duper thing that makes the hair stand up in your head. Neither is your preaching. We're family, right? I mean, there have been times you preach, I didn't feel a thing. It's like there's been times that somebody say, like right now. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Did I blame you? Did I think that you? No. I've been through hell that day. 18 hours of counseling and 3 hours and 7 hours of this and over here ripping me up and this and that, and I was shredded and I didn't have a single fault left in the preaching. You know what I do every service? I get on my feet. I say, preach, brother, preach. Number one, because I believe in you. I know that you didn't just come in here with a half-baked sermon off the internet. You studied and you prayed. That's the first reason, because I support you. The second reason is all of these people need to know that I support you. If pastor is for you, they're for you. If you're for me, all the people that love you real good, they're like, man, look, I'm preaching today. Sister Alice is on the floor dancing and woo! He must be preaching. That's the two. Number one, I love you. I'm invested in you. Number two, I want the people to love you and invest in you and pay attention. I want them to see that I support you. And number three, you reap what you sow. I learned it a long time ago. Ministerially, it is almost a probable fact that of the leaders in our church, not all of them are going to be here in 20 years. Some of you are going to pioneer churches and start other churches, and we're going to help you and we're going to go with you. But here's the thing. It's just like anything else. The way you respond to my ministry, your folks are going to respond to your ministry. But Sandra, the way that you respond to my preaching, whenever you have your own, isolated, just say that you're an old pastor somewhere, you start a church, the folks are going to respond to your preaching just like you respond to mine. Now you tell me how you want them to respond to your preaching. We don't think about that. Is it? Amen. Okay? We got the singers. Where's my singers at? Where's my singers at? Okay, I want you to think about this right here in context of singing. Let's shift it away from me for a moment and the preachers. Sister Ashley. Is it easier to sing when the people are on their feet and their hands are raised? It lets you know. Now you feel the unction, but there's something about it. There's an affirmation. What does it make you want to do? And sing harder. There is a reciprocation, a giving and a receiving. We should draw joy from each other. Make my life easy. Seek the faith. You know what would make my pastorate so much more joyful? You having joy. So that's what I'm saying. And, well, let me move on. I love each and every one of you. Look at John chapter 15, verse 10. John 15, verse 10. I promise you, 8 minutes up, I'm done. And we're going to go straight to the house. It's 10 after. Give me 8 minutes. John 15, 10. If you keep my commandments, you shall abide in my joy, my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. And I know this is not joy here, but love and joy, I mean, definitely hand in hand. They're both fruit of the Spirit. I wanted to show you, though, keeping his commandments allows us to abide in his love. Keeping his commandments allows us to abide in his joy. One of the reasons folks don't maintain joy is because they sin. You can't have the joy of the Lord and live like a devil at the same time. Right? Come on, talk to me. You can't be on the porn tonight and have joy in the morning. No porn and no joy in the morning. You can't be cussing and fussing and wake up in the morning and just be full of joy. It just don't work that way. The joy of the Lord comes from the Lord, and the Lord sends his joy upon them that are living holy. I didn't say that every single thing in your life has to line up, but your heart is right, you love God, and you're striving to go for him. If we sin, we have an enmity with the Father. If, somebody shout if, not when. If I sin, I'm broken about it. I hate it. I hate the very garment spotted on the way. I'm falling on my face and saying, God, I'm stupid. I can't believe I did it. I need your love. I need your joy. Saints of God, he only sends his joy upon those that have pure hearts and feet. He says in verse 11, these things have I spoken unto you that my joy might remain in you. Now there's the word joy, okay? So he says, if you keep my commandments, you abide in my love. Now he says, these things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Our joy is directly connected to our love to God. You don't have to tell me you love God. Keep His commandments. I can tell. I can tell. And if you're keeping His commandments and you're abiding in His love, you have to have joy. If there is no joy, there must be some kind of sin in your life. I heard you. What you talking about? I didn't steal nothing. I'm talking about fear. I'm talking about bitterness. I'm talking about doubt. I'm talking about jealousy. I'm talking about 1,000 things that will choke the life of God out of us. Let me move on. I want you to watch John chapter 16, verse 22. And ye now therefore have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and your joy no man taketh from you. Your joy cannot be taken by a man, a woman, a husband, a wife, an uncle, a money, a thing, somebody, a place, a circumstance. You cannot have your joy stolen. It has to be surrendered. You have to give it up. And I'm telling you right now that you could go back after this service tonight. You could go back to that hellhole you came from and take a life in there. Take joy in there. And when you left downcast, you could come back in there dancing and skipping and saying, the joy of the Lord is my strength. C.S. Lewis, author of Chronicles of Narnia, and I wanted to say, and you know this, when I use the word hell, I say it in its most literal sense. It has different meanings. We talk about a fiery eternal hell, but the word hell also means torment in this life. The Bible said the nation that forgets God shall be turned into hell. I'm using it in that context. It's not necessarily talking about damnation. It's talking about the state of things. So when I say the word hell, I'm not just throwing it out there. I'm telling you that some of you have been through hell today. You've been through pain and suffering and agony. But that does not necessitate the loss of your joy. When the enemy comes in like a flood, the Bible said the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard. But you've got to draw nigh unto God, and He'll draw nigh unto you. When the storm starts brewing, when the rain starts falling, stop looking at the rain and start looking for the name of the Lord, which is a strong tower. God has given you provision for the storms of your life. C.S. Lewis said, our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, when infinite joy is offered to us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in the slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. What am I saying to you? I'm telling you that we have settled for less. Now I want to end this message right here on Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23. I'm going to be done. How long have I preached, Brother Greg? Pastor Greg, how long have I been on the floor?
1 hour.
1 hour.
15 minutes.
Galatians 5:22. Now I want to show you what I'm talking about. I'm still under the subtitle, Joy Cannot Be Taken, It Must Be Surrendered. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy. Somebody shout joy. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, goodness, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. Joy is a fruit of the Spirit. I think it all boils down to this. Are you walking in the Spirit or are you walking in the flesh? Answer that question for me, and you know why you do not have joy or why you do have it. If you walk in the flesh, you will not. If you walk in the Spirit, you will not fulfill the lust of the flesh. And the opposite of that is true. If you don't walk in the Spirit, you will fulfill the lust of the flesh. Now, if joy is a fruit of the Spirit, That means that the tree doesn't, you don't have to walk up to the orange tree and say, make oranges. It just doesn't, right? It's the same thing if we're saved, and I believe we are. I didn't come in here to say you're not saved. What I'm telling you is that the fruit should be coming naturally. There shouldn't have to be anything happen. There shouldn't happen to be anybody say something to you or do something. Just because you have eternal life inside of you, there ought to be joy coming out of you. There ought to be love coming out of you. If you're not experiencing the fruit of the Spirit, you're walking in the flesh. Down me across the house.